Hello, hello, hello. It's Mary Kay Smooth here. Late. I'm so sorry. I had got caught up on a phone call with a young lady that her family and my family were friends for since this like 67. And this is a real story for you guys because it's a community thing. You know, my dad, I always talk about daddy because daddy he was pretty vision. He had vision. And this was one of those times how our families became intertwined is quite a a big deal to me and to those students that were able to take advantage of the opportunities that came. Sorry, I don't have my brush today. I left it upstairs, so I'm going to do this the hard way, which you guys never see me do this. Um, and we started talking because her family, her name's Jenny Gimmelstab, and you might know she has a cousin, J- Justin Gimmelstab, that was a professional tennis player, and her uncle Jerry Gimmelstab was an assistant coach for basketball under Bobby Knight, and her other uncle Barry Gimmelstab was a basketball coach here in town for Southside High School, state championship winning teams. And it was a interesting way in which we met our families. And that's what we were discussing. I always tell you guys about Daddy and his ball players and the playground, Cleveland playground, and they called it the salt mines, and how Daddy taught boys, mostly males, to play, to use athletics to get a free education. My father was raised in a time, as was I, that anyone that didn't have, well, that didn't have the American dream handed to them had to work for it. And when I say work for it, um, there were the trades. However, at that time, because the cost of housing wasn't what it is today, the trades made money and the union tradesmen made money and they could live a middle class life. But if you look at the fact that in Springfield in 1960, a brand new three-bedroom house, moderate, a three-bedroom middle class house was only $23,000. And now when you build a house, it's more like 400,000, 3 to 400,000. You'll see that the tradesmen can make more because the cost of the supplies is nothing. It's not even, it's maybe 10%. The most of the cost is labor, so the tradesmen can make more now. Um so black people and people that coming from other countries try to get their kids to go to college because that was the way. Now today there's a lot of arguing about um people shouldn't made mistakes going to college. I'll tell you the truth. I don't believe that. I think that college is expensive. And college, it's today, the numbers, when you look at the number of students that don't make it through the first year and the number of students that don't graduate, the percentages are high. But the students that graduate, I, okay, and I'll even give you a break and say the students that have an idea, that pick a major that's going to affect what jobs they get, that know what they want to do, and they major in something that's going to take them there, it gets them to that job quicker when they know when they choose the correct major. So those kids are definitely going to do well going to college. Now, if you take the kids that may not major in something that will generate a middle class or better, a six-figure salary. For instance, if you do communications, if you don't have a straight career path to something that's going to generate the financials that you're in search of, then it's not going to be earth shattering. If you say, I want to do political science because I want to be a lawyer, you're going directly at it. That's where there could be a shortfall. Because if you say, I want to go to college, but I don't know what I want to do and I don't know what to major in, that maybe should be a delayed thing. Or I'm going to take the requirements. I'm going to take the essential classes and then worry about my major once I figure it out. That's a different story. But education changed people's lives, and Black people in the 60s, 50s, and 60s, after Reconstruction, actually, Black people start going to college. And in my family, my great grandmother on my grandfather's side was college educated. My grandfather was college educated. My father was college educated, and my mother, but then my sister and I were educated. My sister has a son that's educated, college educated. Now he doesn't have children, but the that same generation in my father's family, there are children that takes us to six generations of college educated people. So our family was able to climb the middle class ladder. And that's what daddy always pushed. That's why daddy pushed sports so that they could get an education for free. Because that was the inhibitor. Money was the inhibitor. If you didn't have money to pay for the college, you needed to have a skill. So the basketball or the football or the track got you a free education so that you could then use your intelligence to get the degree. Okay. Today, in addition to education, there's a large group of people that are using entrepreneurship, and this is their time. Entrepreneurship is absolutely a viable way to change the whole outcome of your life. Now, then, the musicians, the athletes, that's where we're having some static. Okay. So, the professional athlete and the musician, the rapper, whatever, um, in America today, because the glamour has grabbed people's attention, the children want to drive a Rolls Royce. They want to wear the designer clothes. We do. And then we everybody can't be a professional athlete. Even before daddy's kids, everybody wasn't a professional athlete. That's why he wanted you to get the education. So, in case you didn't become the professional athlete, you had your education to fall back on because you went to get the education, really. And then the athletics just could enhance it. So, daddy gets Newark elects black mayor, councilman. The mayor selects blacks to be on the board of education, and in the 60s, well, the very late 60s, and it has a transformation. And this young white teacher from Southside, because it wasn't Malcolm X Shabazz then, named Barry Gimelstob, somehow he gets sent to daddy. He wants to be the basketball coach at the high school where he teaches during a time when black people had just gotten into positions that they had never in the history of Newark, been able to hold. And they really did not want that to go to a white coach when they had the power to put a black man there. And daddy had his boys at the playground, and daddy, his objective was to help them change their lives. And so he sat down with this guy and he wanted to meet the parents to know, what are we really dealing with, because usually if you meet somebody's parents, you can tell how they've been brought up. And daddy could smoke it out in a second. So daddy asked him what was his goal, and he asked daddy what was his goal. And daddy's goal was to make sure his kids were successful and that they had food and clothes and shelter and the things to keep them safe. Because daddy was keeping them safe at the playground. After school, he was keeping his kids safe. So daddy helps him get the job. But when you're going against the grain, you got to make sure that there's success in the air. And daddy had some of the finest players in the city. Success was in the air, but daddy had to make sure that his kids were covered too. So he did. Um, he did. He made sure they got covered, and Barry made sure that his kids were covered. And if any of you are from Newark from that time, I'm sure you know Ray Clark. That was Barry's favorite kid, and and he's alive right now, so he can tell you that Barry took care of them. And that's what my father wanted. He wanted his boys to be taken care of. And I don't just mean for them 4 years they was in high school. I mean all the time. All the time. Until Barry died. Ray Clark could tell you. Because Barry loved Ray Clark. I don't know. Ray Clark and him must have been on the same plane, because Barry loves Ray. He loved Ray Clark. That was, I mean, even though the Larry Foster, Mike Smith, Wendy McGriff, uh, um, oh God, I can't, Rob Williams, that team probably was the best. The Lou Grimleys, Barry. Now I'm not. Barry took care of his boys. Ray Clark was, that was his. If he could have had another child, Ray Clark was his child. I'm being honest. He loved Ray Clark. He loved him. Ray must have picked with him, getting ready for games. Something. he loved his personality. And our families were became intertwined then. And some funny times when I was talking to Jenny, I could tell her father was Burton Gimbelstop. Gimelstob, Gimelstob. Burton would come to the playground and he would go and buy 200 White Castles and bring them to the boys. He My father wanted his kids to have food. My mother was always the stickler about kids having food. You know, you can't go to school if you don't eat. You can't be in an after school program and you don't have food. Um, and so the Gimelstars made sure the kids ate. They made sure there was nothing. I mean, he, Mr. Gimbelstar, Barry's father, had a wholesale business. So he would give my mother chicken, cases of chicken. She cooked chicken, fried chicken, hamburgers, hot dogs. The kids came to our house every weekend for quite a few years because he had to keep them safe even on the weekends. Mhm. Charlie loved his kids, and they loved him. And I grew up with a bunch of brothers, and sometimes they would. It's funny. I would try to sneak out to clubs and they would run into me and go, they call my father 21 or CJ or Mr. Johnson. You know that 21 don't want you out here in the clubs. And they would, I'm telling you, walk me to the car. I could never. It's funny though. It was funny. I had a bunch of brothers, a bunch of them. And the playground was with my grandmother and grandfather's house being next door to the playground. It was so much love in that place. And daddy was always so unorthodox in how he could get them to do the stuff he needed them to do. There was a kid named Tippy, and Tippy was very bright. He wasn't the best basketball player, but he hung around the basketball players. So they used to tease Tippy because he always had books. So what Daddy did, now Tippy, one thing besides being smart, Tippy liked to eat and play chess. So Daddy would send Tippy to my grandmother next door to the playground, and she always had food starting at 3 o'clock. So he would eat, and then he would sit outside and wait for my grandfather to come and play chess with my grandfather. But to keep people from teasing Tippy about the books, my father gave Tippy a brown paper bag and they made it look greasy so it looked like there might have been food in it. And Tippy, so he stopped getting teased. And he used to tutor he used to tutor some of the basketball players. So it was Daddy was always thinking of how to keep his kids out of the mess. And so the Gimmelstabs, I can remember many times when we would go down to the Miller Street store Mr. Gimmelstab had, and he would his brother-in-law Red, that was my buddy. As a kid, he would give me cases of candy when I would go to keep me from messing with them while they were doing whatever they had to do. He would take me to the candy room, let me pick candy. I'd get the whole case, a whole box, 30 candy bars. So my father always made me pick the daggone Mr. Good bars. That's what he liked, and mommy liked double mint gum. So me and Sharon would share it with them. But it was good times, good people, and good times. And my father was able to keep his kids safe, which meant a lot to him. And his young men grew up to be men and make families good families at that. 100%, you never get 100% when you're trying to deal with kids. You never get 100%, but Daddy got a good chunk. And when he got to heaven, God did tell him he did a good job. I'll tell you that. He stayed in his lane. The teaching, the sports, that was his lane. And he rode that joker till he died. He even reinvented himself and did the golf. And there was another the head teacher at Cleveland before my father became head was Frank Series, a white man from the North Ward. And Mr. Series used to drive us crazy because he gave you tough love. He was a tough love guy, and him and Daddy was like yin and yang, but it worked in the playground. It worked. And the playground was something else. It was just we had so much going on, um, between Daddy with the basketball and Newark had such a vibrant after school program at that time, and it wasn't academic, it was athletic. Um, and moral and character building was what was going on there. Teachers teachers had a different job, and kids were different, and families tried. Because I even had Jenny laughing because one day I was with my dad, and we ran into one of his students, Kenneth Butch Hall. And Butch was a short, under 6 foot player, but he was the bomb. And his father said, "I got to tell you a story, Miss Johnson." He said, "I remember when Butch came home and told me, 'Dad, there's a young black man working at the school. He teaches there during the day, and then in the afternoon, he works in the playground, and I want to go to the playground.'" So Butch's father came to the playground to meet Daddy, and he said, "I'm not well educated as you, but I work. If you can feed him, excuse me, if you can teach him, I can feed him." And and then he said to me, he said, "And look what we did." And Butch is the prosecutor for East Orange for well over 20 years. hmm And Daddy has a lot of kids like that have gone on to do wonderful things and have wonderful families. And that his legacy that way, he's tight. Up in heaven, he's having fun because he's tight right now. Daddy and mommy, that's what they did. They helped kids, and it worked in our neighborhood. They helped them learn what right and wrong and hard work and education would do for you. And those kids were able to do it. And we need some of that now in our communities all over the place, and not just in the inner city, because our families are broken now, guys. We got to do work. We got to bring it back and get it back in the pocket, because right now we're kind of jacked up. Mary Kay Smooth about to check out on you guys. I'm sorry I was late, but it was a really we were going through the story. I love you guys, and